I'm so tired of people saying that it's just a movie, it's just a comic book, it's just a TV show. No, it's not. Stories are the building blocks of our culture, of ourselves, even of our own psychology. We are a product of the stories we tell ourselves about our own past and the experiences on a daily basis, but also the stories that we choose to spend time with. What types of values, our feelings, or whatever are they promoting? What types that we like to spend our time around? They're going to shape us. They're going to shape our personality and character, and they're going to shape our perception of the world and the acts and behaviors that we put out into the world. And people don't understand that. They go, it's just a movie. It's just this. I can like and promote whatever I want. Well, of course you can, but you should pay attention to the responsibility that you have.
Consume stories responsibly.
As a member of society, as a human being, responsibility to yourself.
Consider the consequences.
You need some balance. You need some certain criteria that is going to make sure you're promoting the right kind of works, or at least have thought through the type of work that this or that story is going to do in our culture, and then make your own decision whether or not that's something you want to support.
Consume stories responsibly. Consider the consequences. Consume stories responsibly.
Hello everyone, I'm Professor Geek. Welcome back to the channel and welcome to another Office Hours live stream. We will see how well my voice holds out. Really sucked not being able to stream last night, or last week rather, but Sound Engraver and I, man, we caught the devil of a flu. I don't know if it was COVID or what, but it was rough. Luckily, thank God it hit us when I started to develop signs of it a little bit the last day that I had Alyssa, my daughter, and once I dropped her off with her mother, I was just out. And Sound Engraver had it too. I mean, horrible fevers, and it was just it was rough. And it's finally over now in terms of fevers, illness, and everything. But there's this lingering cough, which is the last thing to go. But this one is just rough. It triggers in your throat and you're just like in a spasm of hack coughing and you can't do anything about it. It's not fun. But it's over now, thank goodness. I don't know how long my voice will last tonight, but I couldn't not stream tonight. Had to chat a little bit. So we'll see how long it goes. Studio Super said, "Yay, the wolf intro." Yeah, thought it was appropriate tonight to bring back my old Windows video edit, our Windows movie edit or whatever I did years ago. It's always fun. And thanks to Nick the Brick again for that cool art of me turning werewolf. But hopefully you guys have had a good week. Hopefully you guys are staying healthy. This mess is going around here, where we live, but I think I did read somewhere that it is kind of an early flu season in general in a lot of places. So definitely be careful. It really takes you out of commission. I mean, really does, and it screws you up if you work or whatever. Luckily, I work from home, but even I had to adjust a lot of the, I teach my classes online and stuff, and even I had to, adjust things around, and it's, yeah, not fun. Nathaniel Lowesball, welcome. Nathaniel Lowesball is like, oh, I forgot about the stream, going out with friends this evening. Let me tell you about friends, Nathaniel Lowesball. They'll fade on you, but Professor Geek stream is always here when I'm not sick. Friendship. Darth Enigma, welcome. Eldridge Fan, good to see you. A howling good time indeed. Eldridge Fan talking about the most horrific thing about some werewolf depictions. Yeah, they kill the people they love, and I think that was first explored in Werewolf of London, if I'm not mistaken. And in terms of like literally coming out and saying that. You say that you think it's a example of the monster wanting to cut all ties with the human part. Very well could be. I always looked at it, and it's not either or, it can be both, but as the the werewolf's the shadow self, right? Um, it's the uncontrollable, emotional, primal urge self, and there's a thin line between um, love and hate. I have to coin, do the cliche, but there's there's the infantile part of the brain, the part of the brain, or the reptilian stem, whatever you want to call it, the part that just is concerned with the urges, doesn't really know the difference between, hey, I love this person, I enjoy being around this person, oh, I want to consume this person, whether sexually or, quite literally, food wise or whatever. It's a fascinating, exploration. And that's what I love about the werewolf archetype, is it is a fascinating exploration in the psychology of people. But we will talk more about that in a moment. Crystal Ashes, thank you so much. Struggling to stay awake, so I won't be here tonight, but hope you and the missus are feeling better. Have a lovely stream. Thank you so much. We definitely are feeling better. I don't know for sure if Sound Engraver is going to stream tomorrow night or not. She said some things today, like maybe she would, but then maybe she wouldn't. So she'll announce on the stream here tonight whether she's going to or not. But she's got some cool ideas and some cool things to talk about. Big Al Presents popping in to say hello. Welcome, welcome. Gentle Savage, thanks for hanging out. Final Fantasy fan, welcome. Electric Barbarella, Leia Plus Size, Imaginative Hobbyist, welcome, welcome. This is great. Excuse me. Leia Plus Size saying, YouTube is dying right now because Joker 2 did not turn out the way they wanted. I didn't even know it was out yet, but good enough for them. Good enough for all this. No, I'm not going to say that. Support for the Joker movie was insanity. It was not a proper take on the Joker in any which way possible. People who supported that movie either didn't understand the Joker or didn't understand an elemental villain and how the elemental villain is supposed to be treated, or just wanted to jump on the, yeah, take that woke people bandwagon, because apparently a lot of the wokeites were like, oh, that movie, blah, 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 problematic issues with, whatever. It was ridiculous. And I was one of the very, very few people standing up saying, this is a crap movie. You don't handle the Joker like that. You don't handle elemental villains like that. Oh, shut up, prof. So I'm glad. I'm thrilled that is coming home to all of the people who were just determined to, make the sequel another little tent pole in their stupid arguments. Private Eye in Retrospectiva, welcome, welcome. Eldridge fan, $1.99. This is the big question. Team Edward or Team Jacob? Team don't give a crap. Yeah, I never, and I'm sure you're saying that facetiously too, but, it's a legitimate question. Where does, where would I, looking at the monster archetypes and the different developments and different iterations of them, how would I describe, or what would I say about like the Twilight saga of it? And I don't think there's anything at all that Twilight has to add to the vampire or werewolf archetypes. I don't think it's anything that has to say about it. All Twilight is a juvenile level romance novel / movie, whatever, that happens to use these tropes of vampire or werewolf, and it uses them not in any kind of interesting way. It only uses them because once you're in that genre, once you're in the romance genre, women like the bad boys. They like the dangerous boys. So there's, they want the pirate, they want the rogue, they want the monster, that kind of thing. So yeah, I have absolutely nothing to say about those garbage movies. Studio Super said, would you say Jekyll and Hyde archetype is close to the werewolf archetype? Absolutely. Absolutely. In fact, that's why we started, when we started down this road. Let me answer this in a second, because you're on to part of what I'm talking about tonight. But you're absolutely, definitely. Sound Engraver is streaming tomorrow. She's got her link in the chat there, so check that out. All right. So yeah. First of all, I don't really know I'm going to finish out October still talking about the monsters, archetypes, and all of that. But my plans were kind of hijacked by this sickness thing. Like I feel like even right now I can't really record another episode of the podcast because my voice is just I'm still coughing. I don't know how long it'll last. Tonight's a bit of a test. So we'll keep going, and we'll just see how far we get with the different archetypes, and however many videos I can put up or cut out or streamed or whatever. But yeah, we started with Frankenstein. I said that this fall season, this October, Halloween season, I wanted to focus on specifically the big three, the trinity of monster archetypes, as they're called: Dracula, Frankenstein, and the Wolfman. Because they really are, when you think about classic monsters, those three immediately rise to the top. And they were among the most popular, of the classic movies that were made, but they've also just kind of stuck in the public consciousness because they do serve as sort of a villainous trinity, archetypically speaking. You've got Dracula, the elemental evil, right? He's this, for all intents and purposes, demon, uh, who's just full of evil, period. The elemental, evil. You've got Frankenstein's monster, who is an attempt by somebody to make a man. So an attempt to be like one of us, but woefully gone wrong, right? Trying to think, do I want to really go here or not? Yeah, I'm going to go here. Maybe it sounds weird to you, but I'm going to go here. When you think of Trinity, the most archetypal Trinity ever is the Trinity in Christianity, right? The triune God, God the Father, God the Son, God the Spirit. Okay, now I'm not in any way trying to bring down the idea of the Holy Trinity to just an archetype or whatever, but archetypes come from somewhere, right? And if the most prevalent archetype in Western culture is the triune God, Father, Son, Spirit. Why is that? Why does that, relate so much? Because you've got God the Father. You think about the Nicene Creed, creator, or the Apostles' Creed, creator of heaven and earth. This, even though the Christian belief is that all three persons are the same God, they're just different three persons within the being of God. But you've got the, God the Father sort of inhabiting the more omniscient than the others. I mean, are more omnipowerful than the others. They're all God. You know what I mean? But God's the Father is the one credited with creator of heaven and earth. Through which he created through Christ by the Holy Spirit, all that kind of stuff. I'm not trying to be blasphemous here, but he's that one that's just more elemental force. The face of elemental power. Whereas the Son is the one who tries to take the form of us, right? Jesus comes in the form of a man. So it's sort of a relatable face, And then the Holy Spirit is, and I'm not really speaking theologically here, guys. I'm just trying to show the basis for the archetypes by which other archetypes show up in stories and literature and mythology that sort of pale reflections of this. And the Holy Spirit is just this sort of innate thing within you by which these things are accomplished, That's very vague. I'm not, again, that's not theologically correct in any way, or I'm missing holes and all that kind of stuff. But the basic idea of a Trinity archetype there, and you think about Dracula, Frankenstein, and Wolfman. Dracula is that elemental evil, because we're going to look at it in terms of the villains now. So mirror everything I said there. Dracula is the all-powerful villain. I mean, real deal Dracula, it's kind of hard to imagine somebody more powerful than him. And an elemental evil, certainly. Frankenstein trying to take the form of man, right? But disgustingly so, with sewn together corpse parts and all of that. And there's a, really, whenever you handle Frankenstein, the creature in a story, you can't help but to make him a Christ figure, a literary archetype of the Christ figure to some degree. Certainly James Whale did that with the movies back then, and it's been done, many times since then. But then the Wolfman, if you think about sort of the Holy Spirit, dark image of the Holy Spirit type archetype, the Wolfman is within you. That's the scariest thing about the Wolfman. We're going to talk about that. But the icon of the werewolf that we know today has evolved to the point where it's fear of the evil inside of you. That's really the the foundation of the Wolfman archetype. We'll talk about that more in a few. But I've said before that the Wolfman really does. He's the in terms of the Wolfman as we know him today. It's a relatively recent development or evolution of this monster archetype, because the Wolfman film that really started, the first one to really kind of iconically get it right in major culture, wasn't until 1941, 10 years after Universal started making these classic movies, Dracula and Frankenstein and so forth. And when we were trying to locate each of these archetypes in a literary masterpiece, obviously Dracula, Bram Stoker's Dracula, Frankenstein, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, and we looked at Jekyll and Hyde, and we talked about that because that's where this begins, this look at the duality of man. Now, the werewolf story in general obviously predated all of that. Where the werewolf finds his foundations, it's even earlier than the vampire. Werewolf trials were going on with witch trials long before there were even vampire stories, in folklore. The original idea of the werewolf, though, like when werewolf trials and whatnot, was basically the same thing as a witch in a lot of ways. These were individuals who had made some sort of pact with the devil in order to gain this power to become a wolf, or they were given a special, Peter Staub, the famous werewolf trial, one of them of the day anyway, admitted or confessed to making a deal with Satan, and Satan gave him this special wolf belt that he could put on and become a wolf, and he was glorying in killing his relatives and our neighbors and whatnot, eating them, just massacring them and so forth. You have the Beast of Gévaudan, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, probably not, but stories of just monstrous wolves, preying on villages and whatnot. And there are all kinds of thoughts about that. Was it a rabid wolf? Was it just a hungry wolf pack? Was it a hyena that somehow escaped, some sort of circus or whatever? There are all kinds of stories. So certainly our modern idea of the werewolf or the wolfman definitely draws from these most early, these earliest encounters. Like the idea of silver, as far back as I can plant it or trace it, is the Beast of Gévaudan in France, because the guy who claims to have killed the beast and stuffed it and put it on display and so forth claims to have used a silver bullet. Well, why silver, right? And I think that comes from the idea of the werewolves being the same as sort of witch trials. How would you execute a witch or a werewolf in that respect? They would burn them till death. They would burn them alive in most of the cases, in the earliest instances anyway. And, these are, medieval Catholic villages. Fire has the connotation of purgation, right? You think about purgatory. The idea of purgatory in Catholicism isn't nailed down. There's a lot of artistic depictions of it, but nowhere does the Catholic Church even say this is exactly what purgatory is. All the doctrine of purgatory is, it comes from Paul, I think in Corinthians, maybe, if I forget the right letter, but he's talking about how our works will be tried one day. Our works will pass through fire. So purgatory isn't the same as hell, right? Hell is punishment, but purgatory is a place of flame, even if it's just metaphorical flame, by which your works are passed through. So if your works were true and your works were truly trying to please God and so forth, then it's like gold passing through fire purifies the impurities of it, and it comes out shining even more brightly. But if your works are like wood, then they'll be consumed, and you're still saved. You're saved if you're saved, but you lose those rewards. Like all of your works are just burned up, and you're as one who has just escaped through fire, Paul says. And that's where the doctrine of purgatory comes from. But there's that idea of purgation, with fire, and that's why fire has also survived as a secondary way to kill werewolves. Certainly a lot of werewolf stories. It makes physical sense too if you consume, with flame, all the physics of the body. What's there to reincarnate or shapeshift or whatever. So fire or silver. Now the reason silver, going back to my original point there, silver is a very pure metal. It doesn't tolerate impurities well. silver was also used in a lot of holy implements, silver crosses and silver crucifixes and whatnot blessed. And a lot of the stories will have them making silver bullets out of like blessed crucifixes and so forth. So silver is another way of a purgation, you know. Now, why is that so applicable to the werewolf as opposed to like the vampire or something? Because the werewolf is a human, right? The vampire, even in the earliest folklore tellings of the vampire, they were reincarnated corpses. You know, they were ghouls. They were no longer human. But the werewolf, even taking wolf form, is still a human who has made this horrible choice. In the classic stories, in the classic werewolf trials and so forth, it's a human who's decided to make this pact with the devil or whatever. So there's a purgation that is needed there, and that's the only way to kill them. You know, it makes sense. You know, silver, fire, whatever. As I mentioned before, when Bram Stoker's writing Dracula, he's looking at folkloric traditions and tales of vampires and all this stuff. And Dracula is a werewolf. He's a vampire, but he also changes into a wolf. There's Wolf's Bane, you know, the novel talks about. I think the novel talks about that. Certainly, there's aspects of this. There's the fact that the eyebrows are supposed to grow together, and that's a sign of the werewolf. Hairy palms, you know, when Harker goes to meet Dracula, he's described his hair coming out of his sleeve onto his palm. That was a sign that you were a werewolf back in the day, and so forth. So Dracula, you know, as he was originally written, was even written with werewolf attributes as well. But that classic werewolf really doesn't go into the duality of man and the struggle within man. It's just a man who's chosen the wrong side, a man who chooses evil. Jekyll and Hyde was not in any way intended to be a werewolf story, and it's not. It's not today. But it's the first literary work or masterpiece to really investigate the duality of man. And we talked about this when we talked about the work, especially with Robert Louis Stevenson coming from the Scottish Presbyterian background, the Scottish Calvinist background, and the idea of two natures. This is an innately Christian idea that we have two natures within us, and that we must feed one and starve the other, or starve one and feed the other. You know, and certainly the Scottish Presbyterian or Scottish Calvinist idea was a very specific one, but that basic idea, you know, without the Calvinist trappings, is present in any Christian denomination or religion. And it's interesting to see how I think there were lots of werewolf stories. I would argue that the first one to truly grapple with any depth the idea of trying to struggle with the wolf within yourself, I would say, was Guy Endor's Werewolf of Paris. There were other stories. There's a really cool little short story. I think it's the first English speaking or English language short story of a werewolf. I think it's just called Werewolf. I forget the author's name, but and they reflect sort of the loup-garou or rougarou idea, the French idea of a werewolf who isn't taking their Christianity seriously, isn't celebrating Lent properly, or something like that, and they allow the beast within them to grow. You know, it's sort of the Catholic Molinist idea of the two natures within you. But Guy Endor's Werewolf of Paris wasn't published until the 20s, I think early 20s. And Guy Endor was actually a writer for Universal Studios. He was a writer in Hollywood. Ironically, no one really tried to adapt his movie his novel into a movie until like 1961's Curse of the Werewolf from Hammer Horror. But I do think that a lot of people, whether they'll admit it or not, in Hollywood were taking from his novel the idea of the struggle within, the internal struggle. Because in the 30s, Universal they made Werewolf of Paris. And you should watch Werewolf of Paris. It's a great movie. Henry Hull was a wonderful actor. He did a great job. It's got, what's her name? The woman who played Elizabeth in Bride of Frankenstein. I keep wanting to say Evelyn Ankers, but that's the leading lady in Wolfman. I can't remember her name right now, but she was, the leading lady in Werewolf of London, and it was really more of a Jekyll and Hyde type story. Really, he's a plant a biologist or a plant. What's the word? I forget the name for the plant specialist. So he's not a chemist or doctor in that sense, but he's a plant scientist. And he's somebody who lets his work consume him so that he neglects his wife and neglects his everyday life and neglects his human side, his human trait. And we see the botanist. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that was the name, but the word botanist. But we see the consequences of that, especially with going out to search for this one plant, that only responds to the full moon in certain ways. This is where the idea of the moon started to kind of play into it a little bit. So, but Henry Hull's character was not very sympathetic. He was facing the consequences that were kind of due to him. He was kind of a jerk, honestly. We never really get, and it's not Henry Hull's fault. He's just playing the character that was written there. But his character isn't somebody that you're like, oh man, I really feel sorry for that guy. He's kind of a jerk. He's kind of getting what he deserves to a certain extent. Valerie Hobson. Thank you, Final Fantasy fan. That was the actress's name I was looking for. Now, before I go into the difference between the 40s Lon Chaney's Wolfman, let's talk about the idea of were creatures in general, because I think some people, when they talk about, or you'll see videos or documentaries where they try and talk about the Wolfman, they get lost in the weeds a little bit when they're trying to define the origins, or they're going back into ancient history, and they'll talk about, oh, well, the Epic of Gilgamesh, had a man who was changing into a creature, or, they'll talk about King Lycaon from Greek mythology and so forth. Then they'll talk about where cheetahs or where panthers or where monkeys from different cultures and different whatnot. And yeah, all of that's linked to the extent that it's the idea is man coming to terms with his wild self, with his more animalistic self. Mankind is different than animals, right? We have a sense of sentient being. We have memory. We have a sense of right and wrong and so forth. So man is different than the animals, and yet there's so many likenesses between us and animals and our physical bodies and whatnot, So what do we do with that tension, that duality? And so, yeah, those kind of things always would take place in different cultures, and certainly with different animals, depending on what animals were the biggest threat to that culture, right? So cheetahs in Africa or whatever, you can imagine that would obviously be more applicable to ancient native Africans than a werewolf idea, where cheetah certainly would be. So why is wolf the one that's come to really just encapsulate that archetype for us today? Well, it has to do with a lot of reasons. For one, that we're Western culture, which comes from Greece and Europe and so forth. And the wolf was the biggest. It was hardly, wolves are hardly the most dangerous predators out there by any means. You might think, shouldn't a were-gorilla or a were-tiger be even more powerful than a wolf? But wolves were the most direct threat to a civilized village. Wolves were the ones that would come around the village and feed on the lambs, or maybe grab your small children out there, and stuff. So wolves were something that was a constant threat, a constant present threat that the Europeans certainly had to deal with. Certainly even the first settlers of the United States. Wolves have been beaten back. I mean, wolves were native to the whole eastern coast of the United States, but they were basically done away with, extinct here, in certain areas. Now they're being brought back in some places in the Midwest and whatnot. But they were present there as well, and a real danger and a real threat. They do work in teams, so they work in pack mentalities and hunt together. So they're very dangerous, very cunning. I also think, though, that wolves are a great symbol, and they're a better symbol than any other animal of the capabilities of being domesticated versus still having a wildness in you, right? Because at some point somewhere, somebody had to domesticate a wolf, and that's eventually how we get our dogs, or our household pets, our dogs. So the idea that a wolf would, there's a capability of domesticity within the wolf, and a capability of really true savage, wildness in the wolf. So I think they're just a great image. They're a better image of any other wild animal for this archetype. They're the greatest fit, I think, and that's why they've stayed. What makes Lon Chaney Jr.'s The Wolfman, 1941 The Wolfman, such a classic, though, is that this was the first time in Hollywood, or even I think in a widely dispersed storytelling manner, because Guy Endor's novel had been out there, but it wasn't like a worldwide bestseller by any means. But Lon Chaney's Wolfman brought the same kind of pathos that Universal Studios gave to like Frankenstein's monster. They brought that same kind of pathos to the victim of being a werewolf. And that's owed to Kurt Siodmak's script. That's owed to Lon Chaney Jr.'s, wonderful portrayal of the character, as well as George Wagner's direction. I mean, The Wolfman really is an amazingly classic film. It's not a perfect story. There are some holes here and there, but it's such a classic movie because we don't see any behavior in Lawrence Talbot that would make him deserve this type of curse. We see him being a little bit, I'm going to use this word, and I think they would have meant this word, wolfish. You were considered a wolf back in the day if you were hounding women or catcalling women or just a wolf out there just trying to get as many women as you could or whatever. That was the word for you. He's not really that by any means, but we do see him pretty aggressively. We see him pursue Evelyn Anker's character quite a bit, even though he knows she's supposed to be betrothed to marry someone else. He's like, he's not here now. You're not married yet, So we do see that little bit of a wolfishness in him in that respect, but he does nothing to deserve bearing this mark. In fact, he is cursed with the werewolf curse, to be redundant there, by trying to save a woman that this other werewolf is preying on. Bela Lugosi's, wolf is preying on this woman and kills her, but he's trying to save the woman, and in the process he gets bit. So that's the real, I think, fascination, pathos, and I think real terror of the Wolfman. And I'm gonna have to explain this because I don't think modern audiences really get this. And I'll explain why I think that is and everything in a second. But this is the real terror of the werewolf. There was a 50s film called Werewolf. It was kind of one of those sort of drive-in, 50s movies, but it's actually really quite good. It's not like a B-level film at all. It came out 1 year before I Was a Teenage Werewolf with Michael Landon, which is also another really good exploration of this. Those movies in the 50s, this was the atomic age at that point. So the cause of the werewolf, disease, disorder, whatever you wanted to call it, was usually due to science, due to some sort of mad scientist trying to revert man to their primal state, or trying to beat the radiation poisoning that was surely looming over us all with the atomic weapons and whatnot. But there was one there's one point in the werewolf movie from 56, I think it is. I might have that wrong. But they catch the werewolf, and the people are sort of celebrating at this bar. But I think it's one of the sheriff deputies said, they're not celebrating. They're scared, and they're trying to overcome that fear. And the woman he's talking to is like, what do you mean? Everything's fine. He says, no, they're scared, and I know what they're scared of. They're scared because now they know it happened. And if it happened to this guy, then it could happen to them. And that's the terrifying thing, that it could happen to you. Facing the darkness within you, facing the wolf within you is the real terror of a werewolf story. That's what makes Lawrence Talbot's character so tragic and fun to follow, is the fact that, oh my gosh, that's in me. That wolf, that evil, that capacity, that potential for that kind of violence and terror and evil is within me. And if you don't think that's the case, then you're absolutely lying to yourself. Even as far back as the Kurt Siodmak's original script, they were trying to go, for the psychology of it. And there's a lot of great talks about the shadow self and the evil within man, the duality of man. And if you deny it, if you just utterly repress your shadow, it will come out almost like a werewolf, And on the one hand, people don't, in a lot of classic werewolf stories, some of the evils are some of the ways that a character might cross the line a little bit, moving towards their wolf, inner wolf, are social norms that really aren't practiced anymore in today's society. Like going out and being crazy licentious, trying to get, as much sex as you can or whatever, or trying to, do a lot of different things, violence wise, sex wise, or whatever, that we just, they're not social taboos anymore because we've tried to, we've pulled so far away from religion for our main culture. So on the one hand, we've normalized a lot of the things that the classic werewolf story would paint as your inner wolf. So the modern audience doesn't even recognize that as wolfish. On the other hand, though, we live in a society today where people are 100% dual-natured, straight-up evil little villains. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, how many of you have an anonymous screen name for online platforms? And not that, just having an anonymous screen name doesn't mean you're evil by any means, but what freedom does that anonymity give you in an online space? Think of some of the evil, and I mean straight up evil behavior you've seen people exhibit, hiding behind an anonymous screen name. You can just look at that, anonymous screen name they have as their wolf, and they are horrible to people. And I know anybody, a YouTube creator knows, because you've gotten comments like this. These are people that are exhibiting just the most despicable sides of human nature. And, people who get online bullied, for example, people do all kinds of things online, and they let that inner shadow self fly all over the place because they don't feel like they'll get any consequences for it. It's kind of like Jekyll and Hyde, right? Jekyll wanted to create this formula so that Jekyll wouldn't have any of the consequences that Hyde, would face. It was two different people. It's two different natures, and how many people live online like that? That might sound like I'm being a little hyperbolic, but I'm not. I mean, how we are so much an online culture today, and certainly not everybody does this, but you got that little identity there with a nice firm mask, and no one knows it's you. And think of the despicable things that people do today. So on the one hand, even though we've sort of normalized a lot of social taboos that play into the classic werewolf story, on the other hand, we desperately need tales that show us a good reflection of the consequences of the evils within us. This is one of the things that our technology does. It just removes so many of the consequences. You think about children, psychologists and whatnot saying that as they grow up, they don't have a lot of the social skills that generations before them had because they grew up online or in online settings where they didn't have to face. They could say anything they wanted about a person, and they don't see the pain on the person's face that their words evoke. So they're like, yeah, that felt good. Whatever, I'll do that again. So it's interesting. We don't really have good modern. I think that's why we don't have really good modern werewolf stories. Now, that's not to say that great werewolf stories stopped in the 50s. Of course not. Of course not. As I said, The Curse of the Werewolf, 1961. I have an image from The Howling on the thumbnail. Howling is a great. It's not really so much based on the books. The books were fun, but the movies really just went a completely different way. But they really did delve into this psychology, and of your baser self, and they were great explorations of that. I wouldn't, one thing about it's ironic that wolves are the perfect symbolic animal to embody this archetype because wolves are pack animals, but the werewolf doesn't really work well in a pack scenario. I know it's been done. I know like The Howling, sort of has an idea of it there, but even in a story like that, it doesn't really work. The wolf as your inner basic primal instinct, these are not team players. These are not, family members. Your inner basic shadow self isn't somebody that's going to play well with others. It's different in something like Underworld. I love Underworld, but Underworld's never ever tried to be a vampire story or a werewolf story. Underworld is a mafia family fight story. It just happens to be lichens versus vampires as opposed to, the Italian mafia versus the such and such mafia or whatever. Anyway, I've gone on and on and on quite a while there. Let me go back and just make sure I didn't miss any super chats and see what you guys are saying, so I don't wear my voice out completely. Eldridge fan said, would the Green Goblin be a werewolf variant? Now, I'm not an expert on the Green Goblin from the comics because, like I said, I'm not a Marvel, aficionado necessarily. But as he was portrayed in that classic Spider-Man film from 2002, yeah, it's a Jekyll and Hyde story right there. Norman Osborn isn't Mr. He's hardly Mr. Altruistic philanthropist in the beginning by any means, but he's not the real evil either. That calls to him when he takes the serum or whatever it was. He undergoes the experiment, for the Green Goblin transformation. Then yeah, it's that inner evil voice calling to him, and I did love that aspect of the first movie, how you would see the masks, or the inner self would like talk to him from the masks. That was interesting. So yeah, that's a reflection of that, definitely. Eldridge fan also says modern audiences, it's a metaphor for trans. Yeah, it's anything for the to pursue the agenda, right? Studio Super, thank you. Sorry, guys. Says Dracula is evil, Frankenstein is victim, werewolf is unique for being both evil and victim. Yeah, and that's the human condition, right? That's the human condition. I mean, I wouldn't call humans innately evil. I mean, a Calvinist certainly would, believing in the total depravity of man. We talked about that for the Jekyll and Hyde book, but that man has the capability for both evil and good, and yet at the same time is sort of an innate victim. I mean, even from a Christian worldview, born with a sin nature, in need of salvation, and yet did we ask to be born with a sin nature? We didn't eat the apple, for crying out loud. That was Adam. That was Eve. So these stories are wonderful explorations of that, and of the pathos and anxieties over that. Okay, I think I got all of the super chats. Let's see save my voice a little bit here and see what you guys are saying. Horrid Films says the Wolfman has a piece of music that Danny Elfman used as part of the Batman theme. I did not know that. I do love that Wolfman motif. It's just like 3 notes, but it's so iconic. Once you see the movie, you can't unhear that. I did not know that though. That's really cool. Yeah, if your name's Horrid Films, I think I've taken a look at your channel before. Yeah, this is your field as well, certainly. Darth Enigmas. You can also have were-tigers in the East, Southeast Asia. Yeah, all kind of different animals, depending on different the animals that are prevalent in that culture and that that time and everything. Yeah, Leia Plus Size talking about, yeah. So in the 80s, American Werewolf in London and The Howling took Werewolf up to a whole new level. They really did. I don't talk about American Werewolf in London as much, not because I don't. It's a fine film. It's an amazing film. I did a rewatch of it back in the day, and it references classic Hollywood. It references Lawrence Talbot quite a bit here and there. But in my mind, American Werewolf in London doesn't really, and this is just an opinion, you guys can disagree with me. In fact, tell me something you think I'm missing, if you think I'm missing something. I think the story of American Werewolf in London really doesn't advance or develop the archetype much. It's a cool iteration of it, and the idea like of the werewolf seeing the ghosts of their victims, it's fun for that movie, but I don't really like that idea. I don't think that really fits with the archetype. The one thing, though, that American Werewolf in London is certainly worthy to be praised for is the special effects. Everybody talks about the iconic transformation scene, and rightly so. This is long before any kind of computer effects and whatnot. And it was it Rick Baker who did that, I think, if I'm remembering that correctly. Really, really fascinating. Really good, good development there. Dear Sound Engraver, yeah, yeah. Wolves were huge. They were such a problem back in medieval, and even after medieval England, Europe, and so forth. They're just not anymore, and so people don't realize or don't remember exactly how much of a problem it was. Private Eye saying, "Don't push yourself too much, Prof. I was also sick last 2 weeks. It takes a week to get rid of the sickness. It takes 2 to get rid of the coughing." I hear you, and I hate hearing that, but I hear you because yeah, the sickness is over, and those fevers, man, they were just ridiculous. I mean, you would just be huddled up in so many blankets and dying of a fever, and then you'd wake up just coated in sweat, like you'd taken a shower in your bed. I mean, it was just, man, it was crazy unpleasant. But yeah, that's all over. But I'm glad you're through it, and we're just in the still coughing phase, which is not very fun. Let's see. I got another super chat here. Yeah. Studio Super, thank you so much there. You said the Hulk is 3 archetypes: the wolf, Jekyll and Hyde, and Frankenstein. Which archetype would you say is the strongest with him? I say the Jekyll is strongest with him, with all his hidden sides. Yeah. This is an interesting way to kind of turn the topic a little bit to another or modern appeal aspect of werewolfism. I agree. I think it's Jekyll and Hyde the most in the Hulk, because that's what Banner's trying to do with the experiments at first, right? He's trying to harness harness that innate instinctual adrenaline rush of strength or power in a human being. In fact, the old television show explains it so well. Like, how can a mother, if her child is trapped under a car, how does a mother get the strength to like lift the car? It's just that those mother instinct and initial adrenaline surge. Like where does that come from in a human being when something like that happens? And he's trying to harness that. So that's very Jekyll and Hyde. And the cool thing about the classic Hulk stories was that the Hulk doesn't bust forth as a member of the Avengers and a happy little superhero. No, the Hulk is dangerous. In the early stories, very much werewolf type stories. This is not somebody that you really kind of want to come save you when you're in danger, because you're still in danger even if the Hulk's around. He's not responding to a cry cry for help. He's responding to anything that angered him or that gets in his way and so forth. Now that's developed in a whole thousands of different ways as the comic books moved on, obviously. And that's I think something that is appealing to some people about werewolves, and maybe everybody about werewolves if you're a child just getting into it. See, when I was a kid growing up, Teen Wolf was my first encounter with werewolfism, and I just thought werewolves were amazing, because like Michael J. Fox and Teen Wolf, that was so cool, and it was being used as a metaphor for the changes teenager body goes through and becoming a man or adulthood. They did that with I Was a Teenage Werewolf with Michael Landon. Michael J. Fox's Teen Wolf certainly did it in another way. I remember the cartoon for Teen Wolf was so fun. That was so great, and and so there is that appeal. Cursed. Somebody was asking about if I'd seen Wes Craven's. Wes Craven produced it. I forgot who directed it, but Cursed with Christina Ricci and what's his name? Not Lex Luthor. He was in that. Michael Rosenbaum was even in that movie. It was a movie from the 90s or early 2000s. That was a fun werewolf movie. It was really good. And one of the aspects that movie plays up is that when these individuals have the curse, they are before they actually make the change on the full moon, they're just sort of enhanced human beings. Physically, they've got a little bit more prowess. They've got more animal magnetism, like the young kid who gets it, the not Lex Luthor guy who gets it, he was a little nerd in high school. Suddenly he's like turning heads of girls and whatnot. So yeah, I mean, how can you not think, hey, it would kind of be cool to have a little bit of that ability or power. And this is the lure / danger of the shadow as well, right? Especially as coming from a masculinity standpoint. A man needs to be capable of aggression, needs to be able to harness aggressiveness and power, and Jordan Peterson says it so well when he says you got to have teeth, and he's talking about, sort of the metaphorically there. So in other psychologists have talked about it too, but yeah, the shadow is necessary, and that's why it's so important not to deny the shadow, but to understand and harness the shadow and put it to work for the good, so it doesn't just pop out when it can be repressed no more and do whatever it wants and Hulk out and do whatever it wants, but you actually put it to work. So yeah, stories like the Incredible Hulk are cool explorations of how to harness and direct that power within you that you can't just go about denying. That's the classic Bruce Banner story. How many times in it was in the original Avengers movie, right? He's on the run. He's trying to just never ever trigger a transformation ever again. He doesn't want another incident. He's just going to try and do good work and try and sort of atone. But he realizes he can't. You're never going to be able to not trigger an incident. That the Hulk is within you. It's not going away. It will come out. You better do your best to point it in the right direction when it does. And that's his cool arc, in the Avengers movies there, the early ones anyway. Hey, Wolf 10 Media, thanks. Yeah, good to see you there. It was mid 2000s. Okay, yeah. Jesse Eisenberg, yeah, that's not Lex Luthor, as I call him. Eldridge fan, yeah. Ang Lee's Hulk had wink points, but got Hulk right. Yeah, Ang Lee's Hulk certainly wasn't, the Incredible Hulk movie that every comic book fan wanted by any means, but it's got some strong points to it, and it's got some really good sort of Beauty and the Beast moments in there. It's interesting, yeah. Chaotic Nunez saying the original Hulk comic, Bruce Banner was just a physicist just testing a bomb, a gamma bomb, and he gets doused in radiation, saving a teenager, much like Talbot and the Wolfman. Yeah, exactly. And it's interesting that, I'm glad you pointed out the original comic version of it, because that's what happens with all of these stories that take hold of the public consciousness. If they're close to being there but not quite there, or they writers and audience feedback will click it into place a little bit. So yeah, Banner's motivations weren't really Jekyll and Hyde like in the original telling, but the public kind of wanted it to be. The greater public. Anyway, I'm not saying purist comic book fans, of course, will want this or that, but when it came time to make it the television show, then you've got to appeal to the biggest audience, or the biggest understanding of it. Studio Super, thank you so much for the $9.99 super chat. Appreciate that. Said, one of these nights we got to talk about the monsters of comics. The Hulk, the Thing, Swamp Thing, Man Thing. Wow, raise your hand if Thing is in your name. Yeah, maybe I'll have to do a little research on that to really talk at any length about that in particular. But yeah, that's interesting. It is an interesting topic. Imagine if Hobbyist is correcting me. Okay, so Wes Craven did direct Cursed. I thought he just produced it. I don't know why I thought that. I saw it back in the day. Like, once it hit home video in the 2000s, I watched it and remember liking it. I haven't seen it since then. It's interesting. I did not, for whatever reason, I was misremembering that then, if he really did direct it as well. I knew he at least produced it. Kind of like Wishmaster, one of those movies that he produces but didn't direct. Yeah, Eldridge fan. He's Ang Lee's movie. He's like a giant. Yeah, Damaged Child. Yeah. Yeah, the Ang Lee had some interesting things about it. Ang Lee's Hulk is one of those things that you can really appreciate now. Back in the day, it was infuriating. It's kind of like Superman Returns. When it comes out, it's like, Superman wouldn't do that. What are you even talking about? But now that they've done so many more horrible things with the character or whatever, it's like, man, let me go back and enjoy Superman Returns. That at least had Ralph's wonderfully iconic portrayal of the character and so forth. Yeah, Ang Lee's Hulk is kind of like that. Wish Wes Craven's original version of Curse saw him. Oh, I didn't know he did an original edit of it, or original cut. I didn't know that. I don't know much about the movie's history in terms of editing and releasing and all of that. Oh yeah, absolutely lay a plus size if Marvel didn't turn stupid. And you think about all the wonderful Hulk stories that they just never touched. At first, it was because I think, if I remember correctly, they couldn't. They had rights to the character in terms of the Avengers, but I think another company owned the rights to the character in terms of a individual film. But even once they got the character, no, they decided to just completely neuter Bruce Banner's Hulk, and they thought we'd be more interested in watching She-Hulk, twerking and talking about feminism. Just disgusting. Yeah, Electra Barbarella says they're greedy about the distribution rights for the Hulk. Yeah, I think Universal owned it or something like that. Thank you for clarifying that. Yeah. Uh, The Company of Wolves. I don't know if I've seen that one, Eldritch fan. 1984 movie. I mean, this you think about how many werewolf movies have been made. There's so many. I certainly haven't seen them all. I did see some people talking about Monster Squad. Monster Squad is such an amazing movie. I've got to make sure I watch that again before Halloween this year. What a love letter to the classic Universal monster movies that is. I wish I could get Sound Engraver to watch Monster Squad with me. I think Sound Engraver just does not do horror, guys. She just doesn't do horror. And I think it might sound silly, but I think even Monster Squad would be too much horror for her, even though it's a movie made for kids. It's made for families, Sound Engraver can be playing some sort of like 8-bit video games from back in the day, and some of those can get a little too creepy for her. So wouldn't want to traumatize her. But yeah, I'm definitely going to watch Monster Squad again because I remember watching it in the theater back in the day. And what a love letter to those classic archetypes. And it was a real testament to how much those classic archetypes that the 40s horror films really just solidified in popular culture, how much they still resonate with people, into the 80s, into the 90s, into the early 2000s. Right up through when they made, what's his name? I always blank on his name when I try and remember it on stream, but the director for Captain America First Avenger, the director for Rocketeer and so forth, when he did his remake of The Wolfman, that was 2010, I think. We're at a place now, though, where we've lost in terms of greater public consciousness, of culture in general. Of course, all of us watching this, we know these things, we love these stories, but the greater popular culture has just lost so much of its memory of its past, of its culture, of its past art, of its past stories. Everything is, our culture right now is predicated on waiting on the edge of your seat for the newest thing. And to some degree, that's always been every new generation's, go-to or whatever, but never like today. Never like today with the technology and the so-called innovations that we've seen. It really is about the newest thing, and the newest thing can't last more than 10 or 15 seconds, and even that's pushing it, and then we got to wait for the next thing, and so forth. So it's yeah. Oh yeah, thank you. I forgot about that. He also directed, I didn't know about October Sky. I didn't know he directed that, but he directed Jumanji. I knew. Joe Johnson, thank you. Imaginative Hobbies. Yeah. Chaotician. I like that name, Chaotician. Yeah, Sound Engraver was talking about the Secret of Nim, how that was too much for or Watership Down, sorry, Watership Down. Secret of Nim too. Yeah. Yeah, my dear Sound Engraver, I can't complain. She watches sci-fi with me. She watches we're watching all through Stargate. She's going to be into Farscape and Babylon 5, and she watched all of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. with me. She even watched Ernest Scared Stupid once, and she will watch Ernest Saves Christmas every year with me at Christmas time. She'll even admit that Ernest Saves Christmas is a darn well-made film. Boom. So how can I complain? How can I complain if she won't watch some horror stuff with me? Yeah, Lecture Barbarella said Black Widow was taking the place of Wasp in the Avengers movie because, yeah, the original Avengers, it was Ant-Man and Wasp, I think, were part of the original Avengers crew. Earth's Mightiest Heroes, that cartoon really gave, I think, probably the best on-screen adaptation of the real original comics. Even though it was set to be more modern times, I think that's probably the best we got. But yeah, it's a good point. Boom. Okay, here it is. Sound Engraver has written it down. It's recorded. It's live streamed. It's next to her face. Ernest Says Christmas is a very well written Christmas movie. Darn straight it is. Studio Super, thank you for the $4.99. Said, I'm thinking of making a character. What do you think of the name Phantom Black? That's a cool name, but for what kind of character? For like a werewolf type character? Phantom Black. It's such a cool name though that I'd really check first to make sure that it hasn't been used before, because it's those are two sort of common words and names. So I'd make sure you definitely check to make sure that isn't out there somewhere already first. But cool name, Phantom Black. Definitely cool. Oh, let's see. We are over my hour limit, so I'm not going to stream too much longer, guys. Shockingly and encouragingly, my voice is doing pretty well. I have coughed quite a few times. I'm sure that's fun to hear in your ears, but I don't want to push it either. I don't want to wake up tomorrow morning barely able to speak because I talk so long. I've been having to kind of cheat my way through my online lessons. I'll pre-record some things, and I'll bring some of my different sections together and teach it all once instead of 4 or 5 times, just to save my voice. But this is encouraging that I was able to talk this long tonight without too much pain. But I'm feeling the strain. I'm definitely feeling the strain on my voice. So I'm going to wrap it up here in a minute. Yeah, I agree. Imaginative Hobbyist. Earth Mightiest Heroes was an amazingly underrated show. If the only critique I have of Earth Mightiest Heroes, and it's not really a critique because it's kind of common for the the type of genre show that it is to do that, but I almost wish it slowed down a little bit. It moved a little too fast through all of the great Marvel histories, but it would cover like a big huge event. Oh yeah, we covered that last episode. Like what, 1 episode? What, 2 episodes? You stretch that thing over a darn season, but that's par for the course for those kind of weekly cartoons for kids and whatnot. But it was good. It was definitely good. It was tragic when it was ended. Eldridge Fan said Lovecraft was going to write a werewolf story but died before he could. That's interesting. He'd have made an interesting werewolf story, that's for sure. Yeah, Studio Super, that's the healing power of streaming, yeah. I agree, Darth Enigma. Thank you so much. I'm going to take that advice and go ahead and wrap up now because I think I'm going downhill and I don't want to bottom out. So thank you for that. Yeah, people talking about the Drac Pack. That was fun. Hanna-Barbera. Count Duckula. I like that too. That was fun. There was the Monster Squad as well, which was about the monsters coming back and trying to for their past deeds or whatever as heroes. Not the Monster Squad that I just talked about, the 80s film, but I think it wasn't it an earlier iteration also called the Monster Squad that was like that. So yeah. All right, guys. Well, I'm going to go ahead and sign off here. I will check out Company of Wolves, Eldritch Fan. I appreciate that. There's so many werewolf movies, and some of them are kind of crappy, kind of cheesy, kind of whatever. So, you want to research a little bit what you're getting into. But if you say that one's got some interesting parts, I'll check it out. But appreciated hanging out with everybody. Great to see you. Good to see you there, Wolfton Media. Haven't seen you in a while. A lot of fun streaming. Glad we were able to do it this long. And I'm going to go rest my voice, so I'll be back all the stronger next week. But thank you guys. Until next time, keep enjoying and digging deeper into the true blue monster stories you love. Thanks for watching.